In that video, Tom Cruise says, I put an ethics ruthlessly in my environment. And that's because I put an ethics ruthlessly on myself. Well, the motto of the Sea Organization is to put in ethics on the planet.
How can I help? How can I be useful in ending needless suffering? Do not be afraid of work that has no end.
We have to organize a social movement.
We have an opportunity to lead by example versus just talking, hot air.
I think the more people in this fight, the more we grow. Eventually it could change. The people are the ones that can make the change.
Welcome back to Change Agents, an Ironclad original presented by Montana Knife Company. Today we're going to be talking about Scientology, specifically about leaving Scientology or escaping Scientology, depending on the vernacular that you would choose to use. How difficult is it? How often does it happen? What's the health of the organization to begin with in general? Are they growing? Are they decreasing in size? And what happens to you personally and professionally? And by that, I mean, what actions does the Church of Scientology take if you should choose to leave? My guest today to discuss this is Aaron Smith-Levin. He is a former Scientologist and a former staffer and a member of the Sea Org, or Sea Organization. We'll get into that in the episode if you don't know what that is. Broadly, they are individuals who have dedicated their lives to the Church of Scientology, and they sign a $1 billion year contract. Aaron left the Sea Org in 2006 and Scientology altogether in 2014. Aaron is the creator of the YouTube channel Growing Up in Scientology, and the channel is dedicated to sharing the experiences, talking with those who have also left Scientology, educating and exposing the abuses from within the organization. Aaron is also the president of SPTV Foundation, or the SPTV Foundation, which helps people who are escaping from Scientology and starting their lives, in many cases, from scratch. Let's get into it. Talk to me about your upbringing and then define Scientology for the listeners or watchers in your terms. I mean, I'm sure they can go to the internet and look up a textbook definition, but I'd be curious as to what you define it as.
One of the easiest ways for me to define it in my own words is to start with their words. So they call it an applied religious philosophy. The applied part of it is it's not supposed to be something you have to believe in. It's just supposed to be something you do, like tools, like common sense tools for life. Like any Scientologist will tell you, you don't have to believe in Scientology. You just have to use it. The religious part of it is that it does deal with people from the perspective that they are immortal spiritual beings. And that is at least something that Scientologists genuinely do believe. The philosophy is just because L. Ron Hubbard fancied himself a philosopher, and he very much looked down on the idea and the subject of religion. So in the early days, L. Ron Hubbard would have very much poo-pooed calling Scientology a religion. But once they realized they needed that tax-exempt status, they were like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
let's backtrack on that. We're a religion. So Scientology, of course, I call it a multi-billion-dollar international family-destroying human trafficking cult. So somewhere between applied religious philosophy and human trafficking cult, you might be able to come up with a description that that makes your average person go, "Oh, I get it." But so Scientology is really like a self-help. It's like self-help if you tried to make it religious-y. Like I don't know. It's not like I've been to a bunch of Tony Robbins seminars, but I'm not getting the sense there's a lot of religion, but it's very much self-help in the terms of you're in control. You're in control of your own life. You have the power. You are the master of your destiny. And that really is kind of the message of Scientology. Except the religious part, the spiritual part is you are a spiritual being who is natively all-powerful, immortal, and godlike. And we all are individually. And all of us collectively as spirits are essentially what religion calls the supreme being. In other words, we all collectively as spirits created the physical universe. And so Scientology addresses it from, this is who you are natively. You've fallen away from that for various reasons. And with enough Scientology counseling, which they call auditing, you can get back to that native godlike state. And because that is who you natively are, you are in control of every aspect of your life, whether you currently realize it or not. And with Scientology's tools, with their technology, you can basically fix anything and accomplish anything that you want. So, you know, some people, when you hear about the upper levels of Scientology that are just really batshit, you know, the volcanoes, the hydrogen bombs, the aliens, and all that stuff, people go, how could anyone fall for something like this? Scientology isn't anything like that at the introductory levels and at the lower levels. It's just very much self-help,
which is sticky for so many people, to include myself. Who doesn't want to hear that at the end of the day, you are overall in control of every aspect of the trajectory of your life? Of course, we all want to feel that way. I get why it's sticky. Yeah, the OT levels that we discussed deeply previously, it gets a little bit off the rails there for me. But I think the sunken cost fallacy falls into that. They've already been there for so long. They've spent so much time, so much money. And they'd also have to start bumping the trend and asking their buddies, hey, do you, by the way, this piece of paper they slid across the table to me and that I read about this theory we all came from B-52 bombers and into volcanoes. Do you believe that shit?
Scientology, of course, has its mechanisms, its internal mechanisms to prevent those types of conversations, particularly at the upper levels. Like even a married couple who have both themselves done all of the upper levels are strictly forbidden from discussing the subject with each other, even in the privacy of their own home or their own bedroom, where no one could possibly overhear. And the penalties are quite severe for being found to have violated those rules. And spouses will turn on each other. It's one of these things. The first person to rat the other one out is going to get a less harsh punishment. There's another thing that kicks into play, and I don't know the right words to describe it, but it's, you know, something about social groups and peer pressure and not wanting to be the guy, the one guy there's something wrong with. So like, let's say you're on OT5 and you're like, oh my God, really? This is what OT5 is? This is like, there's something about knowing that a certain percentage of your group has already done OT7 and is still around. You're like, well, this guy, I trust this guy. He's a solid guy. He's competent. He's got a business. He's smart. And he's done OT7 and he's still here. So OT7 must be better than OT5, or there must be something uniquely wrong with me that OT5 isn't resonating with me the way it seems like it must have resonated with everyone else. Otherwise, they would have left, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, you mentioned the sunken cost fallacy. The fact that when you leave Scientology, if you leave Scientology, you have to sever all ties with current members. And when someone's been in Scientology for long enough, at a certain point, not only are most of their family members involved, but also all of their business contacts, their clients, their customers, their employees, maybe their boss. There's is that still included in the sunken cost fallacy of like, well, if I leave now, I'm going to lose everything? That might be an extra layer on top of it.
I think that's an extra layer because, you know, the sunken cost fallacy is more about your own personal time and maybe investment. You're talking about deep social circles and bonds. And what a beautiful system. If you're talking about hooks that want to keep people in that to prevent them from leaving, let's weave in every fabric of your personal and professional life. So when you try to leave, you either have to cut it completely away or you have this group, this tight knit that is trying to keep you in. It's by design. Man, that's gnarly. We should explain to people what the bridge is, where the OTs, so they understand what we're talking about when we say OT. I do because I can't consume enough of this shit. I've watched Going Clear at least another half a dozen times since the last time you and I sat down.
Yeah, so the bridge is Scientology's bridge to total freedom. And what it does is it lays out, it's like a literal poster, you know, a chart. And it just lays out all of the Scientology courses and the Scientology auditing levels to bring someone from being a brand new Scientologist to achieving the highest levels, which they call OT8 or operating Thetan level 8, of which Tom Cruise is an OT8, Grant Cardone is an OT8, Greta Van Susteren is an OT8. And that's all. That's what the bridge is. Now, some people go, wait, why is it a bridge instead of a ladder? A bridge isn't supposed to go up. And L. Ron Hubbard said, no. You have like, imagine you've got like a level of land here, like the lowest level. where a brand new person is. And then you've got the higher states of being and awareness. It's a higher level, and you have to build a bridge from the lower level to the higher level. And that's why the bridge goes up. And you could roughly divide the bridge into the non-confidential half, the lower half, and the highly confidential half, which is the upper half. And halfway up the bridge is what Scientology calls the state of clear. And that's when you've had enough Scientology and Dianetics auditing that they have deemed you have gotten rid of your reactive mind, which is L. Ron Hubbard's version of the Freudian subconscious. Except Freud might have said that the subconscious mind had a whole lot to do with sex. L. Ron Hubbard says it has to do with pain and unconsciousness. And incidents in your life where you have experienced pain and unconsciousness, these are recorded. These incidents are recorded in your reactive mind, and they have negative value, and they have like a hypnotic, post-hypnotic suggestion effect. And all of these incidents are stored up cumulatively through your life, and then you find out this includes your previous lives. And Scientology auditing is geared towards erasing these incidents so that you don't have these negative psychosomatic effects on you. And Hubbard says that once you erase these engrams, your mind is basically a perfect computer. You're purely analytical. You're not capable of a rational thought or behavior. He says like you can't get sick because sickness is a result of restimulated engrams and all this kind of stuff.
What would you estimate the time and cost to walk your way all the way to OT8?
Probably not less than $300,000 to $500,000.
And how long does it take somebody they just cannonball into the pool?
If they cannonball into the pool, they could go from the bottom of the bridge to the top of the bridge in 3 years these days. David Miscavige has made it faster these days than it used to be under L. Ron Hubbard. Like I personally know people who've gone from the bottom of the bridge to the top of the bridge in about 3 years. But alternatively, most Scientologists never reach the top of the bridge, even who've been in it for their entire lives.
Is that because they don't want to, or they just don't have the money, or both?
It's because they don't have the money.
Okay, fair enough.
And some Scientologists actually just give their money. See, there's many ways to give money to Scientology in addition to buying auditing. So a lot of Scientologists would rather give money to like a new building project or something than to have to buy auditing. I think on some level, a lot of Scientologists maybe don't want auditing. So they'll give their money for some other things so they don't have any money left over for auditing.
Well, let's get to auditing in a second, because I want you to explain how, I mean, you obviously know what the hell you're talking about. How is this possible? Well, your origin story kind of explains that. So I want to start with that, or go to that. And yeah, then we're going to dive in on some of the auditing practices.
Yeah. So I was 4 years old when my mom was introduced to Scientology. She was a young single mom, about 20, maybe 24 years old at that time. It was me. She had me and my brother, my twin brother. And she was introduced at that young age. So some of my earliest memories are being in the Scientology organization in downtown Philly, generally wreaking havoc. And then I lived a somewhat normal life, going to public school, playing sports until I was about 12. And then my mom took me and my brother and some of her friends' kids out of school. We did homeschool for a year so that we could do our studies in the morning and then go work at the Scientology organization in downtown Philly at night. And so then after a year of homeschool, so basically at the age of 12, 13, we were pulled completely out of school and started working for Scientology full time. Until I was 26 years old. And then it was 34 years. I was 26 years old when I stopped working for Scientology. I was 34 years old when I officially left Scientology.
How far up the bridge did you make it?
Nowhere. This is actually common for people who work for Scientology. The very first step of the bridge is called the purification rundown. It's a sauna, vitamins, sweat out the toxins type program. That is literally the only step of the bridge I ever completed. On the auditing side, remember there's two sides of the bridge. There's training, there's the courses at where you learn to deliver auditing. And then there's the auditing levels where you receive auditing. I did a bunch of the training side of the bridge. But on the auditing side of the bridge, the purification rundown is all I ever officially completed. And my job in Scientology was mostly to train people on the courses to train auditors. And in Scientology, you can train auditors without yourself being an auditor. But I did both. I trained auditors and I also trained as an auditor.
What's that like? I mean, let's describe what auditing is. And I'm fascinated to know how they teach it to the people who are going to be applying it.
It is basically a weird version of one-on-one talk therapy, except L. Ron Hubbard dictates what's discussed in the auditing session. So it's not like you show up and you said, I've had a really bad week. I want to talk about it. My wife's really getting on my ass lately and it's bugging the shit out of me. Like that's not what you're doing in an auditing session. The questions are pre-laid out in forms, there's lists of the auditing questions and auditing commands that are to be done in every auditing session. Every level of the bridge is geared towards a specific subject. So like you might have one lower level of auditing that's geared towards specifically memory. And then the next one will be communication, and then problems, and then harmful and destructive acts. And then the next one is change. And then the next one is fixed conditions. And then the next level will be when you very much focus on the engrams and erasing engrams in this lifetime and past lifetimes. But all auditing looks pretty much the same. I, as the auditor, am sitting on one side of a desk. You're on the other side of the desk. On the desk is Scientology's e-meter. You're holding the cans or the electrodes of the e-meter in each hand. And I'm asking you questions or I'm giving you commands. You're looking inside for an answer and answering the question, or you're complying with my auditing command. And I'm using the e-meter to dictate when we have finished the auditing process and are ready to move on to the next one. I mean, it looks very boring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's boring until you're put into a place where people keep digging and digging and digging and digging, and they're not going to let you out of the room until they get the appropriate e-meter response that they want. And there's another aspect I think that has to be addressed as well, and that is that the volume of information that is retained on what people say or talk about in these sessions is pretty crazy.
Yeah. Well, every auditing session is thoroughly documented in real time on worksheets. Those worksheets are stored in the auditing folders, which are called pre-clear folders or PC folders. These days, all auditing sessions are also recorded to a hard drive. The video, the audio, and even the needle movement of the e-meter is all recorded direct to hard drive, just in case those folders get lost.
They have a camera on the e-meter now.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I could see why. Well, to somebody who didn't, grow up in that, to me, I would never. I'm very open with my shortcomings in life. Like I will tell everybody everything that I've galactically fucked up. And there's actually not a hard drive big enough for me to tell everybody everything because it just goes on and on and on. I don't really care. So having leverage on me via information, I don't even know if it's possible at this point, but I still wouldn't want to go into that room. That's almost an interrogation. And where is that information going? What is being done with it? If, again, to go back to, if people don't know what I'm talking about when I said I've watched Going Clear another half a dozen times, it's a documentary about Scientology. And they ask difficult questions in that for especially notable people. I would say Cruz and Travolta are probably the two most recognizable names. And people will say, why don't they leave? And then they start talking about these auditing processes and the information that may exist that would prevent somebody from leaving because of leverage.
Yes. You would be surprised, though, because Scientologists are true believers, because they believe Scientology is purely benevolent and that Scientology leaders are purely benevolent. I do firmly feel that people who are in Scientology don't actually stay because they think they're going to be blackmailed if they leave. But there is no doubt that once you leave, and if you speak out publicly, they cull your PC folders and your ethics files and your personnel files for any and all dirt that they can even to use. They'll usually start with some kernel of truth of something you said in an auditing session, and then they'll spin some huge yarn of BS around it. And
that's false. 2% true, 98% false. It's just enough to give people that seeds of doubt.
Exactly. And, there's just no question that they use that confidential material to try to defame and discredit people, former members who they consider to be critics. I mean, in my videos, I'm constantly referring people to AaronSmith-Levin.com, which is not my website. It's a website created by the Church of Scientology, which you think they would hide, but it says at the bottom, copyright Church of Scientology International 2024.
Strong. That's strong work.
And, you know, in my case, you know, I was born and raised in Scientology. I never had a lot of stuff to confess to. So, you know, 99% of this stuff on the website about me is fiction and yarns. But not only, you know, do they dig up material from your files, but they will then interview your family members who are still in Scientology. They will interview coworkers, anyone who ever even bumped into you while you were in the Sea organization, to say how horrible you were, just the worst thing. Oh, he was never good. We give him 100 chances. I mean, honestly, AaronSmith-Levin.com is an amazing example of how Scientology will try to destroy a former member, even a former member who was there their whole life. Like in some respects, it's a little funny because I could sit here and go, if I'm a bad guy, you made me that way.
Also, it's interesting. How does benevolence align with the church's desire to destroy people that have left, or the separation policies that they have, or even something that you just mentioned, the Sea organization, the living conditions, the pay? And it's a very there's a cognitive dissonance there that has to exist, or maybe the information is hidden from members, because I don't understand how you could believe an organization or belief to be so benevolent. And clearly, on the other hand, there's some things happening that are the exact opposite of that.
It's because they believe that Scientology, the technology of Scientology, the process of going up the bridge, the purpose of Scientology is quite literally to save all humankind. And that phrase implies they're only trying to save people on Earth, which is not true. They're trying to save this entire sector of the galaxy. And so they believe that Scientology is quite literally the only chance humankind has to regain their immortal spiritual freedom, and that it's okay to leave Scientology. You're sad, pathetic POS if you do. But if you dare stand against us, if you dare try to make it less likely for other people to get into Scientology, you are an enemy of mankind. And Scientologists would say that these attacks on former members, we're just exposing the crimes of the former members so that people in the world understand that these are evil, suppressive people who are enemies of mankind. So even that isn't really a point of cognitive dissonance for Scientologists. They're like, of course, we're saving mankind. You couldn't live up to our ethical standards, so you left. And in order to be able to live with yourself, you're just trying to attack us to make yourselves feel better, to make the weight of your crimes less crushing upon your soul. And you forced us. I mean, we didn't want to tell everyone this stuff about you, but you forced us. Why do you make us hurt you like this? I mean,
ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Montana Knife Company, a brand that I am very fortunate to know quite personally. They're 120 miles south of, literally 120 miles south of directly where I'm sitting right now. American made, right here in Montana, which makes sense given the fact that Montana is in the name, by the youngest master bladesmith ever in the US, Mr. Josh Smith. Now, if you're familiar with Montana Knife Company, you understand the struggle. It is getting harder and harder to actually get one of their knives. If you've ever gone online on one of their Thursday drops, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I have literally had knives taken from me out of my shopping cart as I am completing the purchase. I believe that either Josh or Jess are doing this personally. I have no data to actually prove that. But there is good news on the horizon if you have been through this struggle with me. They are planning to release 12 new models between right now and the end of the year. 4 of those are going to be in their military/tactical space. He's already released one. It was called the War Goat, and I'm lucky enough to actually have gotten a hold of one of the prototypes. This one actually wasn't stolen from me, Josh. It was actually given to me by Josh, so I can't really say too much negative about it. This is my everyday carry. This thing is in my fanny pack. You can talk smack about fanny packs if you want. It's where I carry all of my things. But this thing is awesome. Everything about this knife is everything I love about the brand. Quality and construction. They continue to evolve in their quality. The actual final product itself is unbelievably durable. It's unbelievably lightweight. I take it with me everywhere. I never get in knife fights except for with cardboard boxes. And that's the way that I'm looking to live the rest of my life. It's a fantastic brand. I love everything about it, and I love the people who are behind it. If you want to support them, go check out MontanaKnifeCompany.com. And Thursdays, try your luck. Try to get one of their knives.
What's going on, everyone? This episode is also brought to you by Allegiance Gold. Gold prices have surged, reaching nearly $2,500, a 20% increase in under a year. With traditional investments under scrutiny, gold and other precious metals have become attractive alternatives. The rise in gold prices reflects growing skepticism towards conventional investments and highlights its stability. Notably, even banks are increasing their gold reserves, underlying its lasting value. Gold isn't just a short-term play, it's a long-term strategy for financial security and growth. Whether you're an experienced investor or just starting, gold should be a part of your investment portfolio. Start securing your financial future with Allegiance Gold, a trusted leader in precious metals with top ratings from TrustLink and an A+ accreditation from the Better Business Bureau. Allegiance Gold can help you protect your IRA or 401k with physical gold and silver, or delivers precious metals securely to your doorstep. If that sounds interesting to you and you go to protectwithandy.com today, listeners will get an exclusive lowest price on the market for select gold bars. That is protectwithandy.com, or you can call 844-790-9191 to talk to an account representative.
Tell me about the Sea Org. And if anybody's ever heard of, I joined the military. I did it in 4 and 6 year chunks at a time. These are rookie numbers for Sea Org members. They sign a much more interesting contract.
Yeah. Sea Org members sign billion-year contracts. And when a Sea Org member dies...
It's not a joke, by the way. For people listening, that is not a joke. That is the number that is on the contract.
1 billion years. And when a Sea Org member dies... an issue gets published. It's like an in memoriam that grants that Sea Org member a 21-year leave of absence so that they have time to pick up a new body, grow up, become an adult, and rejoin the Sea Organization. And the motto of the Sea Org is, we come back.
Well, what do they do? What does the Sea Org exist for? What's their purpose?
Scientology would say their purpose is to put in ethics on the planet, which is funny. I don't know. Tom Cruise a number of years ago did this really cringy internal Scientology video with the Mission Impossible music playing in the background. I call it the black turtleneck video. Does this ring any bells? Have you seen this thing?
I have. And again, because it's referenced deeply in the Going Clear documentary, it was either Rathburn or Rinder who talked about that's the end state of the Scientology system. That is what it actually looks like if you take it to the extremes.
That's correct. In that video, Tom Cruise says, I put in ethics ruthlessly in my environment. And that's because I put in ethics ruthlessly on myself. Well, the motto of the Sea Organization is to put in ethics on the planet. But if you say, what does the Sea Org actually do? The Sea Org and Sea Organization members basically do the exact same thing that a normal Scientology organization would do, except instead of auditing Scientologists on the lower non-confidential levels, a Sea Org, which means a Scientology organization staffed by Sea Organization members, they deliver the upper confidential OT levels. And also all of Scientology management is composed of Sea Organization members. So it's not a religious endeavor. I mean, the Sea Organization is described as a fraternal religious order because it's sort of like the clergy of Scientology. So, I'm no expert in Christianity and Catholicism, but you've got your regular members who are parishioners and they just go to church. Yeah. And then you've got the clergy who their entire lives is dedicated to serving the church. And that's what the Sea Organization is. Sea Organization members, their entire existence is working for Scientology. They don't own homes. They don't have jobs. They live in housing provided by Scientology. They eat meals provided by Scientology. They have uniforms provided by Scientology. You can only have a relationship with another Sea Organization member. And because your contract is 1 billion years, you're also not allowed to have children if you're a Sea Organization member. So again, I'm no expert. I run the risk of misstating these things, but similar to the Catholic clergy, right? Like priests can't have kids. I mean, they can't even have relations. That's my understanding. So the Sea Org it's accurate to call the Sea Org the clergy of Scientology, as long as we're clear that the Sea Organization and Scientology doesn't believe in a heaven or a hell. They don't believe in a God. They don't believe in salvation per se. They just believe in Scientology. But that's what the Sea Org is. That's the nature of the billion-year contract. It's my everything, every aspect of my life for the rest of my life and lifetimes to come is going to be helping Scientology expand, helping to clear the planet, which means getting as many people, at least half the planet, into Scientology and up to Scientology's level of clear or above.
Have they updated the pay charts at all for the Sea Org? Are you aware of any evolution?
They haven't. This is one of the things that I can't even believe it. Sea Org members make $50 a week. Now, it's been $50 a week for 40 years. So $50 a week used to mean something, but
yeah, in 1820.
I know. And it's not even guaranteed. Like there's some weeks they don't get paid because look, the truth is Scientology doesn't make that much money these days selling, auditing, and courses. They make money in other ways. But no, they haven't even updated the pay scale. They don't even get adjusted for inflation.
Yeah, and I'm sure their argument would be, one, you're serving a mission, greater than yourself. And two, we're providing all of these things for you, the food, the lodging, all that stuff. What do you need the money for in the first place? I mean,
I know, but I'll tell you what, they might provide meals and they might provide a roof over your head and they might provide a uniform. They don't provide soap. They don't provide socks. They don't provide shampoo. They don't provide other hygiene products. Like it's insane. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, but, aside from that billion-year contract, they lose these members. They lose these members fast. Someone I'm in touch with inside recently said, we're literally losing more Sea Org members through dying of old age faster than we can recruit new Sea Org members. I mean, that's how few Scientologists are left in the world.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. The information available on the internet is the biggest impediment that Scientology is likely going to have to signing new people up. The information is now there presented to you. And for people, even people who may not have even heard of Scientology, but the younger generation, like my kids, who may have never watched the 70s show, one of my children, 3 of them, I have a almost 21, a 19-year-old now, and a 16-year-old, asked me about Danny Masterson. Not because they understand what the concept of rape was. They were asking, what's this tie to Scientology and why are people saying that Scientologists were trying to interfere with this court case? Very interesting conversation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
It hits their radar through the social media algorithm or churn, and they just happen to see it. So I don't think they had heard of Scientology, but then the next thing you know, an actor is on trial. Well, why is an actor on trial? Okay, for things that obviously people should be on trial for. What's this organization he's a part of? Why is this organization suppressing these women coming forward? Why is this organization ostracizing these women? Why is this organization trying to destroy these women coming forward? I'm curious, what do you think the impact of that trial alone was on Scientology? And I was Googling a little bit before we came on. When you were talking about in your own life how you have been the recipient of this harassment, it's the same thing that they seem to be doing to the prosecutors and LAPD detectives and personnel. They were being followed. They, personal property destruction of vehicles and in their home. Their internet was going on and off at weird times, and a volume of information from, concerned citizens, just this overwhelm. And which is also, if you go back again to the Going Clear, how they attacked the IRS and how they wanted to get their tax exempt status. They started filing individual lawsuits against IRS agents, thousands of them. I mean, my God, what a litigation nightmare.
It's true.
Yeah.
They do a lot of their harassing behind the scenes these days because suing suing people into oblivion was a strategy that worked very well for them in the 60s, 70s, even through the late 90s and perhaps the early 2000s. But with the nature of how small the internet has made the world these days, and how social media, particularly YouTube and TikTok even, has given anyone a platform, believe it or not, they can't even get away with it anymore. The last time they sued someone was like back in 2009, 11, and 12. It was one of their former executives who had spoken out against David Miscavige. They sued her to get an emergency restraining order, maybe a temporary restraining order, and in the hearing, because in order to make a temporary restraining order permanent, you have to have a hearing. Just in the hearing for the TRO, this executive, Debbie Cook, gets on the stand, and for maybe just a part of 2 days, for a few hours, testifies to some of the stuff David Miscavige has been up to. And they're like, oh my God, make her stop. They paid her millions of dollars to shut up and get out of the country. And they've never sued anyone since. Nothing. They didn't sue anyone for going clear. They didn't sue Leah Remini for her book or for her TV show. They didn't sue Mike Rinder for his book. They haven't sued me. And I troll the shit out of him every day on YouTube for the last 2.5 years dedicatedly. They've never even threatened to sue me, but they still look. One of the benefits of having tax exempt status and having a workforce several thousand strong who work 120 hours a week for a maximum $50 a week, you've got a lot of money, and you've got a lot of people who have a lot of time on their hands, who have nothing better to do than to figure out how to destroy Scientology's critics, even if they can't actually do it in a court of law. So you've got lawyers who are hiring private investigators, who are hiring all sorts of nefarious characters to try to make life miserable for anybody who is publicly criticizing Scientology. And Danny Masterson's victims and the ones who spoke out publicly, Scientology didn't necessarily care that they were going after Danny Masterson, because Scientology doesn't care about anyone but itself. What they cared about is that Scientology was going to get caught in the crosshairs.
Yeah.
And it did end up looking like they were protecting Danny, but that's only because Scientology was protecting itself. I'm sure they wish Danny would just have gotten hit by a bus and saved everyone a whole lot of time and embarrassment and public humiliation. So even though Scientology can't sue people into oblivion anymore, they can still try to threaten and intimidate and harass and all that stuff. And I got to be honest, I welcome that shit. That's why I'm on YouTube. I'm like, anything. I mean, last year I caught PIs stalking my house, my neighbors, my neighborhood. And as soon as I found out about it, I just turned on the phone and jumped out there and ambushed the guy. I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. So, if you have a certain mentality about it, then I like to say there's really nothing they can do to you. But I guess that's because I just have a particular perspective on it. The truth is, there's an awful lot they can try to do to you.
How do you think Scientology views Danny Masterson now? Did they cut ties with him once the guilty verdict comes out and they throw him into that bucket of, well, he was a broken person anyway, and we did the best that we could?
You would think so, but they have not. And that's because the Masterson family has it's a big family, and most of them are actors and celebrities. And they've all been, lifelong Scientologists. Mm-hmm. And the Mastersons, pretty much all Scientologists are connected by 1 degree of separation. And, if they officially declared Danny a suppressive person, then that would mean his family members wouldn't even be allowed to visit him in jail. Mm-hmm. Well, if they did that to Danny, I think somebody would probably write a book. I think Danny would probably write a book. And that's the last thing Scientology wants. So, no, they have not severed ties with Danny. And again, it's just purely out of self-preservation.
I bet they go the other way then. Flawed legal system. That's the way that they can still say he's an upstanding member, and it was the system that failed him. It was nothing he did. It was the system. There's always
right.
You just got to keep flipping the coin until the heads or tails comes up as you're looking for it.
Yeah. The way they explain it to current members is they say, Leah Remini rounded up all these women and got them all on the same page, got them to coordinate their story, got them to have, similar details. And it's all an effort to take down Scientology through Danny Masterson. And it's all because of Leah Remini. And that explanation might work to Scientologists who don't know any better. But the fact is, there are many women who accuse Danny Masterson of rape who were never in Scientology, who didn't even live in the United States, who didn't even know that Danny Masterson was an actor who didn't even know who he was until they saw him in a movie later. So yeah, the Danny Masterson thing
He was an accomplished predator.
Yeah, he was an accomplished, seasoned serial rapist.
Yeah.
And which is incredible because he was born and raised in Scientology. So it's one of the wildest things I've ever observed. I was there for every day of the second trial.
Really?
Yeah, I was out in LA covering it every single day.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. Did you get any dirty looks, shall we say, from Scientologists?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's a rhetorical question for sure. Another one that's come up since you and I sat down last, for people who don't know, maybe you can describe the relationship between David Miscavige and Shelley Miscavige, but it seems as if perhaps she was found. And for people who don't know, how long did it go when she was unseen? Was it, I mean, it was years, right? But did it reach the point of like a decade of her not being located?
Well, it's more like 20 years.
Oh,
and it depends on what we mean by unseen. The conversation gets a little murky because Sea Organization members who work at the highest echelon organizations, these organizations are located on highly confidential Scientology bases. So nobody would normally see these people. And if you did see them, you'd have no idea who they were. And so the interesting thing about the Shelley Miscavige story is that for me, because I talk about it a lot, I do a lot of videos about it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I like to talk about Shelley Miscavige being quote unquote missing because it shows that the leader of Scientology, David Miscavige, wasn't even able to use Scientology to fix his own marriage. He got pissed off at his wife. He removed her from her post. Her post in the Sea Org was to be David's assistant. Removed her from her post and sent her off to another secret Scientology base so that he didn't have to see her anymore. Like, that's a pretty, it's a pretty big condemnation of the workability of Scientology technology.
yeah.
But in real world terms, I also don't hesitate to explain that she's not actually missing. She's a Sea Org member who works on one of these highly confidential Sea Org bases. It happens to be true that working at one of these bases is one of the highest promotions a Sea Org member could ever get. Like your average Sea Org member would kill to be promoted to one of these bases. In Shelley Miscavige's case, it also happens to be true that it was how her husband got rid of her.
Man.
You know.
This episode of Change Agents is brought to you by MTNTOUGH. I've done a few things in my life, not all of them physical, but there is one thing that I believe. When I have been successful, it has largely been because of the physical capacity and capability I had at the time. The brain is what solves the problems, but it's only as good as the chassis that it is built upon. And that is what I think the value of strength and conditioning, or conditioning in general, is for everybody, regardless of what it is that you do. If you want the muscles, or the muscle, I should say, between your ears to work at peak performance, you need to focus on everything from the neck down as well. The cool thing about MTNTOUGH, or some of the cool things I should say about MTNTOUGH, is you can do it anywhere, right? You can, if you have an internet connection, if you have a device that connects to the internet, you can find the workouts that are suited for you. And it doesn't matter what level of conditioning you're starting, they have a program that works for you. And there's also a community of people that can help hold you accountable, that you can interface with, ask questions, and join in. I mean, we all know that doing something arduous is better when you're sharing that suffering. Camaraderie, right? It's a combination of pain and laughter. That's my description of it. And some of these workouts hurt. That's okay. The benefit from that is worth it. If you have a community to share it with, it's going to keep you on board that much longer. So MTNTOUGH is offering Change Agents listeners an incredible offer, 40% off on the all-new MTNTOUGH Plus annual subscription with the code CHANGEAGENTS. The way that I'm looking at that, it's one word in all uppercase. Go to MTN, that is Mike, Tango, November, Tough, regular spelling.com, and enter the code CHANGEAGENTS to receive 40% off, a savings of about $100 on your MTNTOUGH Plus annual subscription. That's MTNTOUGH.com, and enter the code CHANGEAGENTS to save 40%. That's less than 50 cents per day for the best-in-class physical and mental training available to you. There were some dark moments. Holy shit.
We ought to probably have dinner sometime.
They were ghosts.
Okay, this guy's serious.
I mean, it's unheard of, right? Yeah. Tens of thousands of children digging cobalt out of the ground.
You just sensed that it was out there.
It's like they'd been hit by a nuclear bomb.
We're not framing history correctly.
I want adaptability and versatility.
Don't draft Wolf on your fantasy team. He's not going to get the ball this year.
This is going to matter one day.
This is how I pulled myself out.
That's when my eyes were opened.
This is a whole new wildlife enemy, man. This is crazy. Who are these guys?
Us in our own country don't even have the same gratitude towards it.
And he does the right thing because he closes the distance.
We're all programmed in this world to push ourselves even farther.
I don't have to make something important, but what I have to try to do is make something you'll never forget.
Let's talk about David Miscavige. It seems like he was the right-hand man for Hubbard for a long time. He ascended through the SEOR, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like he came that way. And then when Hubbard passed or ascended to his higher level or highest level of OT training, which is, I believe, how he described it on the podium that day, he discarded his body because it was no longer of use to him. It seems like that was the rise of Miscavige. And it also seems like the organization shifted pretty drastically underneath his banner. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. Particularly after 1993, when the IRS gave Scientology his tax exemption back. After that point, there was no checks and balances on the behavior of the organization or David Miscavige himself, and things really went downhill. Now, Scientology was already, a money-hungry, family-destroying cult before that, but Miscavige did figure out how to turn it into even a worse version of itself. But I will say, part of the myth that Miscavige has spun to Scientologists is that L. Ron Hubbard selected him to take over Scientology. It's actually not even true. There was another couple named Pat Broker and Annie Broker who were with L. Ron Hubbard for the last 6 years of his life when he was off in seclusion working on his upper-level OT research, as you pointed out. Those are the two people who were supposed to oversee or sort of steward the change of power over the organization of Scientology after L. Ron Hubbard died. And it's a very interesting tale of how Miscavige managed to oust Pat Broker and to sort of crush Annie Broker into submission, and even push Mary Sue Hubbard further off to the side and take over control. It's an incredible story. We'd never be able to do it justice here, but the fact is Miscavige wasn't even selected by L. Ron Hubbard to take over, but everything else you said there was accurate.
Is there any way, I mean, it sounds like a really effective coup. Is there any way at this point to take the power away from him, or would he have to leave or die at this point?
He would have to leave or die. Not only is there no mechanism to get rid of him, but that's not even something any Scientologist would ever even consider. It's kind of like Kim Jong-un in North Korea. Like they worship Kim Jong-un as practically a god. Like it's almost like if you were already of a frame of mind that you thought he needed to go, then almost by definition you would no longer be a Scientologist.
That makes sense. He's been accused of, I mean, everything from abuse, human trafficking, forced labor. Now these accusations come after people leave, obviously, and for every accusation, there's probably 50 people from inside of Scientology that would argue against that. But is there any way to hold him or that organization accountable, or are they hiding under that religious exemption as well there?
They are hiding under it, but I do believe there is a mechanism to have them held accountable. Perhaps not for the human trafficking angle, because a lot of what I and others would describe as human trafficking can be argued away in terms of just religious volunteers making religious commitments and stuff like that. But Scientology, because it is actually a shrinking organization, has had to resort to certain types of credit card fraud, identity theft, bank fraud, wire fraud in order to keep the money coming in. And I don't say that lightly. I'm talking about stuff we have hard evidence for. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about bank fraud, wire fraud in terms of hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's the kind of stuff the cloak of religious liberty does not cover. And that's the kind of stuff that the feds can really sink their teeth into, because the documentation of that never goes away. You can always investigate that and the evidence doesn't disappear over time. I personally believe that it's the financial crimes that Scientology will eventually lose its tax-exempt status for. That's my personal opinion.
Well, it's interesting that they seem to be cash poor because they're certainly asset rich. I have a number that I'm looking at right here. They have more than 11,000 churches. And
That's a false number. That's a false number. They have they have about 150 churches.
Okay.
Well,
I was going to say,
to be fair.
Yeah. That's
no. To be fair, that's the number Scientology puts out is 11,000.
Which would be insane, right? Because you're not poor if you have 11,000, if you own 11,000 pieces of land with infrastructure on top of that. You might be cash poor, but you're certainly asset rich. It's interesting. I was going to say, because that doesn't make sense to me. Why would they have to resort to these type of financial crimes? I mean, maybe carve down your investment portfolio a little bit here in some of these churches. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. Well, and then it also says in that same show note, there's about 40,000 members. What does Scientology say they have as far as a membership base?
15 million.
Wow.
By the way, it's much lower than 40.
Yeah,
it's much lower than 40.
Easily demonstrably false. I think you could sit outside with a little clicker button at any one of these facilities and do some rough back of the envelope math, and you're not going to get anywhere near 15 million. That's wild.
I do the back of the envelope math in spreadsheets, and I do videos about it. And even with the most generous estimates, and I mean the most generous, if Scientology announced tomorrow that L. Ron Hubbard himself had returned, had reincarnated, and had come back to take the show back over, and there was going to be a massive event in Dallas Stadium, the Cowboys Stadium, and you could not scrape together 35,000 Scientologists in the entire world, even pulling people out of the nooks and crannies who maybe drifted away over the years. You could not drum up 35,000 Scientologists if your life depended on it in the entire world. And I've done that math. And I've done that math and done videos on it in a way that any current Scientologist would be able to watch that video and go, oh my God, he's right. And it's been right in front of our eyes the whole time. I mean, look, I'm embarrassed to admit that when I was in Scientology, I believed there were millions of Scientologists in the world. The evidence that that was not true was right in front of me the entire time, every day of my life. But when you're in a cult, there's just something about asking questions like that it just there's a fuse broken there. Like you just don't have those thoughts. And I do want to say Scientology is actually not cash poor. They have tons of cash in the bank. But Scientology has a management system where your stats aren't allowed to go down week over week or month over month or year over year. And there's an effort, fundraisers, like if a fundraiser does $1 million this week and $750,000 the next week, or $1 million last week, $750,000 this week, they're considered that they're a low producer. Like it doesn't matter what the raw number is. If the number goes down, you're in trouble. And I'm talking week over week. So give me work with me here for a sec. Let's say it's August. Mm-hmm. Let's say last August, I'm a Scientology fundraiser. And last August, I did $10,000 all month. But this August, I did $50,000 in the first week, $40,000 in the second week. You're not allowed to go, but hold on. I'm up huge over August of last year. They would say, I'm sorry. If you did 50 in the first week and you did 40 in the second week, you're in trouble. That's how it sounds absurd that any organization could be run this way, but Scientology is run week by week on stats, and your stats are supposed to go up week after week after week. And if they don't, you're in trouble. So it's crazy, even though Scientology is not cash poor, because the number of Scientologists in the world keep dwindling, it's harder and harder for Scientology fundraisers to keep their stats going up week after week. Yep. And the penalties imposed for being down stat are severe enough that Sea Org fundraisers will resort to actual identity theft and credit card fraud to keep their stats up. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's an interesting mindset to put somebody into. It's just what have you done for me now? Mm-hmm. Let's not look at what you've done for me in the past. Let's just only focus on what you have done for me now. Yeah, you're going to put people into a crisis mindset at all times, especially if you're being judged week over week over week. The move there is obviously the first week you raise $1. Second week you raise $1.50. You know what I mean? I'd put myself on a lower trajectory, but I don't know what that says about me. That's right. Why'd you leave?
Oh boy. The simple answer to that question is I didn't want to leave because I didn't want to lose all of my family, all of my wife's family, all of my friends, my job, my wife's job, my kids' friends. And, you know, the path out of Scientology is a gradual one. And so when I first started being exposed to credible and negative information about Scientology in 2009, the first thing that happened for me mentally was I just started to kind of peek behind the curtain. I started to realize, oh my God, everything I thought was true in my life is no longer true. And that was sort of its own path, just coming to terms with believing different, seeing that things were lies and believing new things. But that's a mental exercise. That's got nothing to do with your community. And just because I was having changes mentally, that didn't cause me to want to lose my community or my family. And I was actually totally content. I could have lived the rest of my life continuing to exist in the Scientology ecosystem, being a quote unquote Scientologist in good standing, but just mentally being out of Scientology. And I did that for several years. So from 2009 to 2014, I was considered a Scientologist in good standing, but mentally I was totally out. I was secretly in touch with a lot of people Scientology would call suppressive persons, people like Marty Rathbun that you mentioned, people like Mike Rinder, many other people, former high-level Scientology executives like that. And I was still working for a Scientologist. My wife was still working for a Scientologist. My kids were still going to Scientology school, all this kind of stuff. There was no switch that flipped one day that was like, I got to get out of here. I got to sever all ties. I've got to leave and bring as many people with me on my way out. Like that switch never flipped for me. I actually convinced myself that I was going to be able to get away with sort of living this double life for the rest of my life. And I was just deluding myself. And, you know, Scientology is pretty much, well, especially these days, but it's pretty much always in witch hunt mode. If they know they've got these former Scientologists who've left, the high-level managers, they're constantly on a witch hunt to root out current members who are secretly in touch with these other former members. And that witch hunt is nonstop. And as the years rolled on, I just got a little more careless as to how carefully I was keeping this secret, that I was secretly in touch with these bad people. By the way, these bad people included my mom eventually, because they kicked her out too. And I was just living in a delusion that I was going to be able to keep living this double life for a long time. And eventually Scientology, you know, because of the snitching culture in Scientology, and because I was getting more and more careless about keeping this secret, they just kept getting reports from friends of mine and people who worked for me and my kid's nanny. They kept getting reports that it really sounds like Aaron's in touch with not only his mom, who we've already expelled, but a lot of other bad people that we've expelled. And eventually they said, this guy's just going to keep lying to us, isn't he? And they had to be like, yeah, of course he is. I mean, of course he is. And like, okay, you're out of here. And so that's the thing. Like, it's funny when Scientology says, we expelled him, he didn't leave us. You go, well, that's kind of true. But I left you guys in 2009. You expelled me in 2014. Yeah. There's just something about that social cohesion or adhesion where just because I no longer believed a certain thing, it didn't mean I wanted to leave everyone I cared about in my life. And I guess there was a part of me that felt, nor should I have to. Like, it's Scientology that insists you have to sever all ties between current members and former members, not me. And so I was just desperately trying to hold on to the only community I knew. And they're the ones who said, no, we don't play that way. That's not how we roll. You don't march to the tune of our drum. You can't sit at our table. And that's how that went down.
Yeah. Nobody wants to lose their tribe, man. I actually think the social cohesion that you talked about might be stronger than the cognitive attachment to an ideology. Nobody wants to be the outsider, especially when every stitch and piece of fabric in your life is associated in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you ever see people leave and then go back?
These days, not so much. In earlier decades, that would actually happen a lot. people would be declared a suppressive person. There's particular steps in Scientology that if you want to get back into good standing, you can. And it's called the A to E steps, A, B, C, D, E. And a lot of Scientologists in the earlier days would do those steps. But when that would happen, that's usually because somebody was kicked out for actually breaking a rule. And that was someone who never wanted to leave. They weren't connected to other former members. They just got kicked out for breaking a rule, and they were going to work very hard to get back in. But these days, so many people are kicked out because they've been mentally out for years, and they're associating with other former members, and they're only staying in for the community aspect that we just discussed. And then eventually Scientology catches on and they kick them out. Those people really never go back anymore. You mentioned one of the guys that was in Going Clear, Marty Rathbun.
I was going to ask directly, did he go back?
Yeah, he took a money deal from David Miscavige to go back. Now it's not like Marty Rathbun is, going to his local Church of Scientology and taking courses. Marty's not allowed to walk into any Church of Scientology, but he took a money deal to turn on all of his friends, and Scientology now uses him as a source of hate videos. I talked about doing hate videos with someone's family members and former associates. They now also do interviews with Marty Rathbun talking crap about all of the people who were his friends after he left Scientology. Marty Rathbun is a very unique type of despicable rat.
I mean, in Going Clear, he dissects at a very precise level the inner workings of the church, the things that they did, the auditing, the information that they used and collected in the auditing, what they would do, the dossiers that they would collect, the websites that they would create if people left. He was very open about that. And now he took the money, and maybe he didn't go back, but I suspect that the money was associated with him. It's the technical term, shutting the fuck up. So
I'll tell you the blackmail they had on him. And this information comes to me from a source that was personally in touch with Marty. Marty and his wife, Monique, were adopting a child. And Marty is a very famously bad-tempered individual. And also they were adopting a child. Marty must have already been in his 60s. Mm-hmm. You know how tough it can be to raise kids.
Oh, yeah.
You need patience. Marty and patience have never been uttered in the same sentence. They had him under 24/7 video surveillance. They had him on video losing his temper and abusing the baby that they were, the toddler they were adopting. Ooh. And that was the leverage they had against him.
You know what?
They could have used that evidence to terminate that adoption. Whatever the right word would be there.
You know what an ethical organization would have done? One, not have people under surveillance. Let's start with that. Let's, in some hypothetical world, say that there is an ethical reason to have somebody under surveillance. You find that type of information, you care more about the child than your organization, and you step in to save the child, and the rest of that garbage can, dumpster fire can burn itself to death. That's super fun.
That's right.
Okay.
You'd think they would care more about the child who's being adopted by an abusive father than they would about using that evidence as leverage against Marty. And, in case Marty wants to try to sue me for slander or whatever, we can add allegedly to this information, but this information came to me directly from someone that was in direct touch with Marty Rathbun during that whole time period. So if it's false, I don't know it's false. The guy who told it to me claimed that it was true.
Yeah. So you used to work with the Aftermath Foundation and since we sat down last, you moved on from that. At what level can you talk about your decision to do that?
I think we can just casually chalk it up to personality conflicts.
Okay.
I was the face of the Aftermath Foundation. I was the vice president, and I was also the one who ran the entire thing. Mike Rinder considers himself to be a much bigger personality than me, a much more important personality than me. I also take a lot of liberty on my YouTube channel and in my videos to call out people that I choose need to be called out. And I think, to be fair to Mike, it got to a point where Mike was pretty much just sick and tired of feeling like he was somehow automatically co-signing everything I said or did on my channel or in my life just by virtue of the fact that he was a board member of a nonprofit that I ran. And, instead of resigning and stepping down from the foundation that I created, I ran, and I raised the majority of the money for. Luis Garcia is the one who's the actual creator of the foundation. He was the president and the founder, but me and Luis ran the whole thing. So instead of stepping down in a way of showing that he doesn't need to be held accountable for me. He decided he would use his leverage to just kick me out of the foundation that I had ran for 6 years. So that's fine. We'll chalk it up to a personality conflict. And so I said, you know what? It's actually better for me because now I can start a foundation that does the exact same thing, use the power of my platform, use the power of what we have come to call SPTV, which is really just all former Scientologists who are speaking out about their experiences on YouTube. And so it's called the SPTV Foundation to reflect the fact that even the financial support the Aftermath Foundation received came from the audience of SPTV. It is all the non-Scientologists out there, people who've never been in Scientology, who support the former Scientologists who've taken advantage of the YouTube platform to spread the message far and wide about what Scientology is really about. It is those people who have always been the supporters of these foundations. And so I wanted the name of the new foundation to reflect that. So that's kind of what the term SPTV refers to. And that's where the name of the SPTV Foundation comes from.
So when you encounter people who have never heard of Scientology, or maybe even people who do know, you're like, dude, Aaron, can you shut the fuck up a little bit about Scientology? Why does it have to be about this? Why is it such a passion for you? Why when people ask you, well, hey, broad terms, they could probably ask it a variety of ways, but like, hey, why should I care? I was never part of Scientology. I don't know anybody who was a part of Scientology. Why should I care?
Oh, I mean, if the question is why should I care, I would say you shouldn't. I'm not trying to convince anyone they should care. But if someone does say, why do you do it? I go, because there's no better way to say fuck you to David Miscavige. Like, my goal is just to be his worst nightmare and the biggest thorn in the side of the human trafficking cult that he runs. And if someone goes, why? I go, why not? But for why, I go, because it's exactly what he doesn't want people to be able to do. They used to be able to litigate and intimidate people into fear and silence. And YouTube gives us a vehicle, a mechanism whereby Scientology cannot shut you up. They cannot cancel you. They cannot sue you because discovery would hurt them more than it would hurt the person that they're suing. And I just go, why not? And because the main thing that motivates me is because it's what David Miscavige doesn't want us to do. It's why, the moment my own platform started to grow, I thought, what would be even worse for David Miscavige than having this platform grow more, bigger than it already is, if there was 100 other people doing the exact same thing. And that's kind of where SPTV came from, is I was like, let's get 100 people doing channels like this. Let me use my platform to help other people grow their platforms, who can then in turn help other people grow their platforms. And let's really just make David Miscavige's life a living hell. And let's give the Sea Org members something to do, because now all those guys have to watch every minute of our videos to see what we're saying and to try to figure out who's giving us information. And we're like, let's make their lives a little interesting, give them some fun videos to watch. It also provides a funny little way to get real, true information about Scientology into the Sea Organization, because now a lot of those people are assigned to watch our videos. So, yeah, it's really just to be David Miscavige's nightmare. And we can try to help as many people along the way. But what drives me is making David Miscavige regret all the families that he destroyed, including my own.
Man, that was a quick over an hour. I'll give you the closing thoughts, and then, yeah, I'll shoot you a text and we can figure out a way to get you back out to Montana.
Awesome. Yeah, closing thoughts is, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I just, I think I just want to.
I had to enjoy being a thorn in people's sides.
It's so humbling how much support there has been in the real world outside of Scientology for former members who come out and tell their story, despite the fact that they're going to lose anyone in their lives who are still connected to Scientology. And chances are Scientology is going to try to figure out how to mess with their lives. And I think one of the reasons that support exists is because you don't have to be a former Scientologist to resonate with the stories. Abusive relationships, other high control groups, these things have there's so many common threads between these things that even former members of other groups, or even just people who've been in bad relationships, they hear these stories and there's something about it that resonates with them. It's very powerful. And so I just want to thank everyone out there who's supported not just me and my channel, but other former Scientologists and other channels. And, you know, this is it's even popped off into a whole other thing of live streaming protests outside of Scientology.